Welcome to Life Unfiltered. Today's episode is a conversation with Yael Simon, a global philanthropic strategist with over 20 years in the UK, Europe, Israel, and abroad. She specializes in funding development, strategic leadership, and advisory services with private family offices, high net worth individuals, governmental bodies, and nonprofit organizations. Yael comes with expertise in international funder collaboratives, strong global networks, philanthropic field analysis, research and development. Her approach is multifaceted, providing transparency, accountability, and ownership of philanthropic causes through a compelling narrative. Yael has dedicated much of her career to research and field development of economic expansion in key regions through Europe and the Middle East. She's also a writer, public speaker, having appeared at many conferences and events all over the world. She is a passionate advocate for workforce development, sustainability, climate initiatives, mentoring female entrepreneurs, leadership, and social justice. Yael was named by London's mayor as one of the top 400 women who make London great, and has organized many events to promote women's leadership. Yael holds a certification from the London School of Economics and Business, International Relations, and the Political Economy, a master's in law and international business law, specializing in anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing, and has recently completed a master's in organizational leadership at Said Business School, University at Oxford, with a focus on AI and philanthropy. She currently lives in London and is married with her 7 children. Yael, welcome in. I'm so happy that you could do this. I think you might be the farthest traveled guest coming all the way from the UK.
It's great to be here.
No, but I'm super excited. We've met in real life, but we really did connect online. And you fascinated me from go. I've long wanted to introduce you to my community. I'm really pumped about today. So thank you for being here.
It is really exciting. I'm thrilled, honestly.
Okay, good. I have one quick question. You always recap my podcast. So who is going to recap this one?
Oh, that's a good question. I have one person who might actually recap it. You know who that is? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, fine. Because you do the best synopsis. Like, the people have to know that your recap of the podcast are the best, most succinct, and you usually nail it.
Thank you. I'm like the Siskel and Ebert.
Yeah, exactly.
Podcasts.
So I always start with asking people to tell me about the way that they grow up, but I'm going to switch that up today with you. I want to hear about your present. Tell me a little bit about, like, right now, where do you live? A little bit about your current day-to-day life, like your today life. Who are you?
Right. So those are 2 very complicated questions. Okay.
True.
Who are you and
Yeah.
what are you doing? And I find often, like, when you go to these, cocktail evenings and business networking evenings, the first question they ask, and Alain de Botton talks about this, in the pleasures and joys of sorrow and work. He says, when people ask you, what do you do?
Yeah.
People freeze up.
So true.
They have no idea, because it's like, what do I say? Do I tell you my job description? Do I tell you my title? But that's not who you are, and that's not what you do. That happens to be your day job.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you have to find a word. So if I have to have a word to answer that question, is I'm a strategist. Okay. And that kind of embodies everything. So you kind of see the world like a chessboard, right? People make moves. You think about where you are, think about where you need to be, what people say and how they behave. And it's a lot of, like, there's so much in it, but this all originated from actually just being extremely observant and being a bit of a street kid. And you kind of learn very slowly. I think you understand that, you understand when you kind of like watch the way people react, and then you react a different way, and so on and so forth. And that's translated into a business. So I'm a consultant.
Okay.
And I've worked for 20 years in the philanthropy industry, and I've kind of also added bits and pieces to that, including anti-money laundering, counterterrorism financing, knowledge and experience and understanding. I had founded a startup as well. And so, the question of kind of, and it's funny that you're asking me this now, because everybody comes to that point where they're like, what do I do now? Is that all there is? And so I've kind of had to have a really good long think about it. And I've had a little bit of break from work right now just to take time out. And I think everybody should be doing this, is to think like, well, I've done so many things. I've learned so much. I know a lot of different areas. And it feels like, and I've heard you use this word before. I now introduce myself like this, by the way, and I give you credit. I put it on my LinkedIn. I am a multi-hyphenate. Yeah. Okay, so thank you for that term. But the question then is, it's like, I know how to do so many things, but what is it that I'm doing? And so I've kind of, had to develop this thinking of like, well, let's say there's a triangle. And so what are the points that define that and define what I know and what I do? And can I create something in that space? And I have a very deep belief that when you create a boundary and when you have boundaries, you can be free within that boundary. And that goes for everything: personal life, professional life, relationships.
Yeah.
You need to have a boundary. And so my boundaries and my outline are about philanthropy, about anti-money laundering, counterterrorism financing, and we'll just call it AML-CTF.
Okay.
And now a new aspect, which is AI. And so the question is, what happens in the middle there? And what's happening in the world right now is extremely relevant.
Yeah.
So when I woke up one day and I'm like, wait a minute, this is my moment. This is it.
That's why I brought you here today.
Right. This is it. I worked out.
Yeah.
And it takes time. You can't do this while you're running and you're busy with clients, private clients, and I have a lot of private clients. You can't do that unless there's quiet and space. And in that silence, a lot of times the answer comes. And so I've drawn this, kind of boundary for myself.
Yeah.
I'm developing this space: philanthropy, AML, CTF, AI. And believe it or not, the universe is answering. I don't even believe it or not. I started doing thought leadership in this area, writing a lot, doing a lot of speaking as well, networking, just constantly finding people who are part of this triangle.
Yeah.
And this is where it's at. So all the things that are happening in the world right now will fall somewhere between these points.
Yeah.
So I feel I am developing this now, along with constantly educating myself and constantly reading, constantly getting degrees. As you see, I'm addicted to education.
Yeah. Well, they found that out in my intro.
Yes, in your intro, which I didn't hear. Okay. So I'll have to critique that when I hear it. And I just think that, they say that, when you open up yourself to the universe answers. Like, I don't know if that's true or not, but I do know that you have to gather all of the information and treat your life in a way like, why am I here? So I've heard you also say in previous podcasts, which I love, what is your why? Now, I decided I don't actually have a why because...
I guess why am I here is different than
why
what
am I
is your...
here?
Yeah.
Exactly. So for me, it's not a what is my why, but rather, what is my purpose? Why am I here? I do believe I'm meant to be here.
Yeah.
I feel a purpose. Everything I've done in my life is for a reason.
Yeah.
And so it's a matter of like thinking about it and organizing it and then pursuing it. So I live in London.
Okay.
And that's what I'm doing.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Better than I ever could have imagined.
Okay. We're off to a good start.
Because you do such interesting things. I mean, even when I was trying to figure out how to make a title for this podcast, I typed it in backspace, and I landed on Global Fixer.
Oh. Okay.
I wanted to say our very own Olivia Pope, but after I told several people about the reference, they didn't know who Olivia Pope was. Firstly, I think everyone needs to know.
Everybody needs
because
to know.
It's one of the greatest shows. And it also just really encapsulates what you do. But you're a global fixer in many ways, and so it's interesting. I mean, talk to me a little about the philanthropy part. How did you land? Like, how was the philanthropy brought in? Was that something you were always passionate about? Did you fall into it? Because now that's like a huge, huge part of what you do.
Yeah, it is a huge
Philanthropy's
part.
kind of niche.
Yes and no.
Okay.
So actually, I believe philanthropy is the root of everything.
Huh.
Right, because it's very much about giving and taking.
Yeah.
And so that dynamic actually exists. And I did a TED Talk on this, on people who think that charity is like something else.
Something that happens for other people who are very wealthy.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
But actually, it is the foundation of the social fabric of our lives, right?
Whoa. Wait a second. It is. Can you say that again?
Yeah. So people think,
Yeah.
I'm starting from that point, yeah.
Yeah.
People think that charity is like something else you do. In a way, it's almost like a bit like religion, Oh, that's something I do when I
also see it like art a little bit, like it's
yeah.
untouchable.
Yeah, it's untouchable.
Yeah.
Or something I don't understand.
Yeah.
But actually, the dynamic of giving and taking is so powerful. I do believe, and I'm saying this as a religious person, but I do believe, and I'm wondering if I wasn't religious, I would say this too probably, that God created this dynamic of giving and taking.
Yeah.
You're both.
Yep.
And philanthropy or charity or whatever you want to call it is not a thing that we do externally. It actually forms the foundation of the social fabric of our lives. So, for example, people used to meet each other through charities.
Yeah.
Yeah, they used to have events and you'd meet your better half,
Yeah.
through a charity. And it wasn't a matter of like, it was a part of a discussion, everything we did. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't, obligatory.
Yeah.
It wasn't administrative. It was very much part of like, I'm here to build and give and do something. And then also I get something in return. And that's the giving and taking.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Wow. So I guess the AI is a later component, but that's really where it all began.
So that's where it began. And the AI is, for me, so interesting because it will affect that dynamic. And the question is how. So like we know, how it'll affect it in an administrative way.
Right.
It'll make things easier. And like
Right.
the way it was described to me from a global expert was, we used to think that spell check was cheating.
It's true.
And now we're like, what, you didn't spell check it?
Yeah. The thing about AI too is like everybody thinks about it as some like foreign concept that's in the future, in the near future, here now. But AI has actually been around for a very, very long time. I mean, even algorithms learning our likes and dislikes. That's AI. It's
It used
been around
to be called
forever.
machine learning.
That's right.
Right. And so there will be small changes which will actually make our lives easier. And you'll stop thinking about it like, this is AI. You'll just do it.
Yeah.
So ChatGPT and those things. And these kinds of things, it is machine learning. They get smarter, they understand. And so, but the question that I'm posing, with my work is how will it actually affect the way we give and take and the way we lead?
Yeah.
So the thing that combines these three corners of my triangle that I've developed is leadership.
Yeah.
It's leadership.
Are you a natural born leader?
So I'd like to say yes, but I used to think the answer was yes.
Yeah.
And I used to say things like 20 years ago, like, look, either you're born with it or you're not, right? but I don't think that's true anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that leadership can be trained, it can be taught, it can be inspired. And I think there are different kinds of leaders, and I don't think there's like one size fits all.
Yeah.
And I used to always introduce myself. Now here's like, I don't know how you introduced me here, but like, I always used to introduce myself starting with the story of my father, like who was born in Baghdad and he kind of made this whole journey to Israel and then, then to America. And he instilled in me this concept of leadership, and he did. But that's his story. That's not my story. And so the question is, was I born into an environment where it was like, you're a leader, you're a leader? Yes, I was. But does that make me one? No.
Right.
And that's my answer now, is that I have made many mistakes in leadership. I've you could say even misunderstood it and abused some of the power of understanding the power that you have to lead.
Yeah.
And taken it for granted. And so therefore my answer is now, it is a skill you have to learn. There are aspects about it that you have to be careful. You're dealing with people. You're dealing with dynamic in the world. You're dealing with systems.
Yeah.
And all of these things have to coalesce. And leadership requires thinking and strategy and respect and honor of the environment, the world, and people most of all.
People, right.
So, over the course of 20, 25 years that I've been working, I definitely see where I was. It was not honed at all.
Yeah.
And so was I living off this thing where I was like, oh, I'm a born leader? Probably.
Yeah.
But that's not enough.
Yeah.
It's not enough. So you have to work at it. You have to develop it. It's a partly muscle.
Yeah.
And you can't let go.
That's so interesting. What are some like non-negotiables in leadership for you? What are some qualities that like great leaders have to have?
Right. Well, the first one is definitely a respect of the people around you.
Yeah.
The number one thing, I think, without doubt, is empathy.
Yeah.
And again,
I think that's where a lot of leaders fall short.
Yeah. So I would say that's absolutely a priority.
Okay. Empathy
And
respect.
speaking personally, I lacked it.
Yeah.
And I was very drunk on the idea of like leading organizations and being great and building whatever I was building. It was like half altruistic and half really about me. So there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with the self, the id, the person, the ego.
Yeah.
Because egos can do great things.
And I think you need to have a certain level of healthy ego to be a leader.
Exactly.
Otherwise, no one's stepping up.
Exactly.
Like, why be?
Right.
Right.
People need to feel that they own something and that they can lead something. And so that's good. But, finding that balance between the healthy ego and that doesn't tip over and like then you lack the empathy to understand what's going on and understand the context. Context is everything.
Yeah.
I think that's really where, you could fall short. And that's why I think empathy is the most important. And again, empathy can be taught. It has to be practiced. You cannot lead without that major value.
What are some things, like I think actually I'm not dissimilar in that I had to teach myself empathy. Maybe not empathy, I had to teach myself kindness. I don't know that I was a kind young person. In fact, people who like maybe grew up with me would have known that about me. What are some things what are some words or some things you like self-talk to help yourself gain empathy?
That's a really good question. First of all, it was the realization that I was not really an empathetic person. And I saw that in my personal life with my family.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of failures in that area. And so, it's kind of like, again, back to one of your guests. I listened to all your podcasts. Okay, so
I'm
one of your
so
guests,
happy.
The antidote to everything is practice.
Yeah.
And so I knew, and together with therapy as well, that you have to practice it to understand what it feels like. And, this concept of like, just shut up and stop talking so much so that you can give space and listen to what the other person is saying. This idea of putting yourself in their shoes. We talk about that, but it's very hard to do.
It's very hard to do.
And you do need to practice, and you need to just suspend yourself and your presence and your concept of self and be totally with that person. And I'm a work in progress. I keep listening. I keep thinking, what does it feel like to be that person? What does it sound like to them, their pain, their struggle? And so again, you can hear echoes of like philanthropy there and leadership. And like, yeah. So empathy is number one to really understand that. And I shared that video with you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. I mean, I wish everybody could have been privy to just all of our conversations leading up to this. I mean, I think
dangerous, but yeah.
Yeah, it's true. Dangerous. It's you are so drawn to leadership and a lot of the work that you do. I mean, even in, the intro, I talk about it. It seems like you have a real understanding and a real passion about leadership, not just for yourself, but cultivating it in other people and especially other women. Which I guess is one of the marks of a great leader, because I would just want to be great myself and really not necessarily rally for people around me, but you're rallying for other women around you. So you're like a real feminist in that way. Do you think of yourself as a feminist?
Gosh, that's really a $64,000 question. Okay, so again, like you're talking to me now, but like then I would have said, no way, not me. Feminism had an identity.
Well, it gets a bad rep.
Yeah.
But in its core, do you think that feminism is bad? Like innately?
No.
I think it was designed to empower women, not necessarily. Yeah. I think where maybe we got it wrong is that women felt if they were to be empowered, that we had to tear down the opposite gender.
Exactly. You see, it's very binary in a lot of people's mind. It's like, well, if it's this, it's not that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's what it is. So like, if I go back 25 years ago and think like, what did I think feminism was or wasn't? I thought it was very, Germaine Greer and, fighting the patriarchy, and like, it's not that at all.
Yeah.
It's not that at all. And then I had a series of professional relationships which went wrong with women, and it took a long time to really understand what it meant to fight for women, and that women saw me as a role model and I wasn't living up to it. I was like thinking, what do they want from me? And why do you want my support? And what do I have to? And I saw women then as quite competitive. And I was like, also like a lot of low self-confidence, like I have nothing to offer you.
Right.
And so that's a lot of growth.
Yeah.
And so, the famous Eleanor Roosevelt, there's a special place in hell for women who don't support women, right?
Yep.
And then again, more experiences where I fell down, mostly because of my lack of self-confidence. And so the part about leadership and feminism where they're crossroads is like having enough self-confidence to say to yourself, I have something to give and I believe it. And again, practicing supporting women, practicing praising them, seeking out opportunities to mentor women, going there and saying something nice, posting something nice, clapping, calling somebody up, leaving a message. You've done a great job. And I have an amazing role model for this. And I didn't realize that this role model, and unfortunately she's in the next world now, but like I didn't realize at the time, this is like 13 years ago, that this woman left such an impression on me as to how to not just treat other people, but women.
Yeah. Because it's a whole other
It's a
thing.
whole, I mean.
It's hard.
It is hard. It is hard because
hard. I'm somebody who's very self-confident and self-assured, and I get really intimidated and threatened by other women. I can't imagine what it's like for people who don't have as much self-confidence or aren't as self-assured. It's competitive as hell out there.
It's definitely competitive.
And I think a lot of also like society is, you even see it with like celebrities. I see it all the time. Like they pit like girls who dated the same guy, like, oh, like they must be jealous now. Like it's very possible that things, and like society, media, the world really likes to pit women against each other. They're even doing it now with Beyonce and Taylor Swift.
Yes. Because
they're both very powerful, dynamic. They both sell out arenas. Why can't they be friends? Like there's obviously enough room for the both of them, but there's a whole, they try to do this. Why do they do that?
Right. So again, I think it's binary. I think people feel if there's a winner, there has to be a loser.
Yeah.
If there's a victor, there has to be somebody who's, failed.
Yeah.
But going back to what I said about giving and taking.
Yeah.
Adam Grant wrote a great book called Give and Take. And I think the biggest thing you can learn from that is that when you give, you lose nothing. And so to be consistent in what I'm saying, going back to when I was talking about the give and take dynamic, in this world, there are givers and takers. You are something at every given point. You're never only a giver. You're never only a taker. And if you start to see yourself like that, you realize that there is a tremendous relationship you can build with people. And in that relationship, there are opportunities for building people up.
Yeah.
And you gain something from that. They gain something from that. And that, to me, is really one of the cornerstones of leadership, because leadership recognizes leadership.
Yeah.
So if I see you, and I say, and again, sorry, Adam Grant, love him, but just wrote a new book called Hidden Potential.
Yeah.
I feel like I should get commissioned for him.
Isn't that Grant? I'm always seeing like quotes about him
industrial
online.
Psychologist, organizational psychologist.
Okay,
right?
yeah. So then maybe.
And, this idea that there is this potential and what do we do with it and how do we recognize it and make it grow. So that is an achievement in itself.
Yeah.
But it took time, Adel. It wasn't natural. I didn't just go, hey, women, great. I looked around and I did see great examples of people, but I just want to tell you about this role model.
Yeah.
Her name was Lady Amalie Jacobovitz, and she was the chief rabbi's wife of the UK and the Commonwealth. And she was in the community, and every event that I put on in charity, she would call me up afterwards and tell me, and this is like before, first of all, she didn't text, okay? Yeah. She'd call me up to tell me what a great job I did.
I love
what
that.
A fantastic leader I am, how organized it was, how beautiful it was. And when she passed away, really heartbroken.
Yeah.
She's a great woman.
Well, to have somebody champion you in a way like that when they leave.
Yeah.
It's like, it's interesting, we don't do that enough.
Yep.
We don't champion each other enough.
Right. And she did, in a very old school way.
Yeah.
But it was so meaningful. You got off the phone and somebody saw you.
Yeah.
Somebody touched you like this. And, and when she passed away, I just thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call people after I have an event, after I do something, after they've done something. I'm going to tell them how great it was, how much I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
How creative. I can pull out my thesaurus, but
Yeah.
words, the phone call.
Oh, it makes, whenever you do anything, an event, a simcha, a party, a fundraiser, when everybody leaves and the door closes, you look around and you want to go, did anybody see what I just did? And so basically a verbal affirmation of, I saw what you just did is so important. Because otherwise, without people championing us, we're literally just walking around doing stuff all by ourselves, essentially. It's like really what it is. That's the way to show people you see them. I see you're going through a hard time. I see you're struggling. I see your wins. I mean, I think it works even for a not win, right? It's like, even if somebody's drowning, it's like, hey, I see you. I'm gonna
save you.
or I'll just be there with you.
Yeah.
It's like seeing people. And I'm realizing as you're saying this, I'm like, I actually don't do that enough.
It's practice, honestly. And I'm telling you from experience, but I love the way you phrased it right now. It is seeing people in their struggle, in their space. And you just made me think about something that, a lot of times we ask ourselves when we do something, is it good enough?
Yeah.
Did it matter?
God.
Right?
Yes.
I always do. Not did anybody notice? And I think you and I have had discussions about attention, and why do we want attention? But this is not that kind of attention.
No.
This is God, do you hear me? Do I matter?
Yeah. Is what I'm doing.
Is what I'm doing okay? Is what I'm doing going to make a difference? Because at the end of the day, that's really all people want. They want to be loved. They want to be noticed. We want to be wanted. We want to be acknowledged. We want somebody to see us.
I do.
I do.
And I think people often also think that strong or outspoken women don't need it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, get me started. I feel like the next thing you're going to say is
true.
imposter syndrome.
Yeah. No, but it's true. I feel like the stronger you are and the more self-confident you appear, people just think you don't need the call after the event. They don't, that's why anybody who writes me about my podcast, I could get 500 messages. Every single one I will write, thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. Because for somebody to take the time out of their day, an hour, 2 hours, you know how valuable time is. And it's there I see the work you did, but you wouldn't think that I would really need that. But
I think people think that about me too.
That's of course.
And it's like,
well, you're a fixer.
I have been told I'm intimidating.
Yeah.
My own kids say that. Walk into a room and you don't say a word. And inside you're just thinking, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
And what am I supposed to be doing? And everybody else is thinking, oh, she's walked in.
Yeah.
And so that kind of it's a struggle to meet those two. And the space in the middle that I think that I'm now comfortable is I do think that I'm worthy.
Yeah.
I think that I'm supposed to be here. I'm not afraid. I don't want to be intimidating.
Yeah.
But I think the damper to being intimidating is empathy.
That's right.
It's kind of like when you talk to people, you realize you are in their space. You're listening wholeheartedly. You're really focusing on the words, on the timbre, on everything that they're saying.
Yeah.
And you're listening to them as if you were saying it, as if you were experiencing it. And you can do this anywhere. It's not a trick I learned. I mean, it takes practice and it's work.
Yeah.
But nothing comes for free.
No.
What, you just want to be a leader and want all the attention and, everybody you just mentioned
I do.
as well in the world. We all want,
You're right.
Yeah, and then you start to question, and that's where the hard work on yourself gets really qualitative is why do I need attention?
Yeah.
But I think everybody does.
Yeah.
And admitting it is the first step.
Yeah.
And understanding how much is too much and what is enough.
Yeah.
How much do you need?
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
I think that's part of maturity is asking yourself, is this a healthy need? Because I think everybody should have a need for attention. If you have no need for attention, then there's something wrong there. That's the opposite end of the spectrum. But
or it's disingenuous.
Or it's exactly.
Yeah. People, I don't need.
Yeah.
It's not
exactly.
True.
100%. Right. But it's true, and I think But it's interesting because I always just, and this is, I guess, what you were talking about leadership. I always thought either people are empathetic or they're not. You're giving me so much food for thought and like, oh, actually, no, you could become an empathetic person. I just assumed you were born with it.
I think some people are.
Right. We're not.
No, I mean, I'm not.
I think it's like, you're very pragmatic. Listen, you can't do what you do out in the world if you're not highly pragmatic. You can't be emotionally driven to really be a great problem solver. I think some, but I would say probably requires a high level of like reasonability, level-headed, not being too emotional.
So that's a discipline.
Right.
Because I think without emotion, you're not going to get very far. What drives change in the world is very much about the passion that we bring to life, to the world, to projects, to people.
Yeah.
It's that excitement. It's that energy. And without it, but like it's the discipline of knowing where it sits and how much is enough.
Yeah.
After that, the pragmatic part is very much about how am I going to carry this out now?
Yeah.
So I only really half answered what your question earlier about what do I do?
Yeah. How do people find you?
Yeah.
When they have
Lately
now they're around.
Yeah.
No, but like how do people find you when they need something fixed?
Yeah.
When they have a problem? When they need or
Well, I found out that people find me by word of mouth.
Yeah.
And that it dawned on me recently that I literally I have not actually had to apply for jobs in my life because one person tells the other person tells the other person. And I feel I'm very blessed like that. That's great. Still you have to go and find your daily bread. There's no question about it. I have to put a lot of work into everything. But, now I know as well, there's like thought leadership and education and posting things. And, it's like a whole suite of development, self-development.
Yeah.
And certainly as somebody who is a consultant, you have to put yourself out there. You can't sit at home and wait for opportunity to knock. I tell my family this all the time. Opportunity does not knock. You have to go out and find it.
Yeah.
And then it will come to you. And I've actually seen that happen a lot. It's not a magic pill.
Yeah.
I don't want to make anybody think if you
just go to a couple networking events.
Yeah, no, it's a constant networking, and it's qualitative networking with really high quality connections. And it's not like, hey, what can you do for me?
Right.
But again, back to the giving and taking. It's kind of like, what is this here? Can we have some kind of sharing of giving and taking that I feel that I can contribute something to that person's business, life, whatever, and then I will be enriched from it as well.
Right.
So my work is really about fixing larger issues in the world, workforce development. At one point, it was about orphanage in the Ukraine and taking children out of state orphanages. But it wasn't so much about the charity side. It was about the narrative and the story.
Right.
And to me, the story is everything. Yeah. So, you asked about leadership. You asked about what do I do, about philanthropy. Everything that we've said so far, and here's the next level, is the story that we tell.
Yeah.
Because that's about our identity.
Yeah.
And people want to believe in something.
Yeah. Wow. So it's like, it's interesting. It's some of it's strong arming through breaking habits, practice. And sometimes it's about knowing, no, this is not my identity. This is not who I am, which brings me to my next question of you've lived a couple different lifetimes. You were a shlucha, an emissary of the Rebbe.
Yep.
Talk to me a little bit about that time. Where were you in the world? Somewhere quite remote?
Yeah, it was quite remote.
How long were you doing it, and then what was the shift?
Right. So this is a question that I'm going to be very careful about answering because my family has different feelings about it. And it was very formative years of their lives.
Okay.
And also very important to my husband, who could have lived really where we lived forever.
Okay.
He really felt it was for life. And I want to honor that and respect that. So I'm just going to answer for myself.
Okay.
At the point that I became religious and really believed that,
were you born religious, or did you become religious?
I think, my father was a very traditional man.
Okay.
It was kind of like, did you keep Shabbat? Well, he did last week or the week before, so that was fine. And my whole childhood was an evolution of of becoming observant or, and really belonging to communities. My whole life has been about communities.
Okay.
And so you can hear the way I talk about a lot of things, again, philanthropy and this, it's all about the relationships, and the community is a relationship.
Yeah.
Where do you
think
find
that that was such a stressed value because your father was an immigrant and maybe
Yes,
felt very
absolutely.
alone?
That's an excellent question and a good conclusion. That's exactly. And so this dynamic, and you're touching on it right now, which is going to be part of my answer, of this idea of being alone and being part of something, again, weaves throughout everything I'm talking about. And so he came from Baghdad and then lived on they moved over to Israel in 1951, lived on a transit camp with his 9 siblings.
My God.
Lived in 2 tents, one for the men, one for the women, had his bar mitzvah in a tent. But, from that point to when he came to America, it's just a story constantly of reinvention and chasing opportunities and networking. And these are old school things that just don't get old. We're still doing that, and we're chasing and building constantly and improving. And so, this idea that I was ready to go out and become religious and then live in this place. It was just, again, pioneering and building, and it's just constant renewal.
Yeah.
There's a constant cycle of renewal and excitement of doing something new or strengthening something. And I have an amazing story, which I'd love to tell. Because it actually affected my whole life and not just the period that we were in this remote town. So before we went out this remote town, we were actually living in a northern town in England called Leeds.
Okay.
We were there for a couple of years. And then, we finished that period. We had one little baby and I think one on the way. And my husband got lots of opportunities around the world, everywhere from being the chief rabbi of Uruguay to, to working in South Africa and working in Sweden. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
But we got one opportunity to go and live in Germany, in Stuttgart, Germany. And before we went, we were interviewed by a gentleman who is no longer alive, but he was very, he always looked like Father Christmas to me. I don't know. Anyway, his name was Rabbi Gluck, lived in Stamford Hill. And he was kind of like an ambassador in Europe for the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he had a job. His job was lighting. He did lighting and fixtures. But he asked to see us because Germany was in his purview. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe told him that he's kind of has to look after these communities and also liaise with state governments and the kings and, prime ministers so that the community would be accepted and whatever. He told us a story. Before we went to Germany, he told us a story and he said, I'm going to tell you a story within a story. He says, I want to tell you a story. King Carlos of Spain invited me to come and have an audience with him. And this is actually in the BBC archives, this interview, many, many years ago, 30 years ago already. And King Carlos of Spain said to him, Rabbi Gluck, I don't understand what you do. Is your job to come and make these people religious? And Rabbi Gluck answered and said that the Lubavitcher Rebbe told him that his job is to strengthen the Judaism as he finds it. Now, that concept has formed and shaped my outlook on everything in my life. To come and change people is not the point. Again, about hidden potential and about leadership. You're not changing people. You are strengthening what it is as you find it. And so when we ended up going to live in Bristol for 10 years, and my husband was the rabbi and the student chaplain there, it wasn't about, I remember one woman came and she's like, I don't get it. Are you coming making us religious? And I just had this in my head. We are coming to strengthen the Judaism as you find it. And so we spent 10 years there. And my husband loved it. My kids loved it. We homeschooled all the kids.
Wow.
I gave birth to many of the kids there. And it was a challenge, but it was beautiful. It was this concept of being alone and being part of a community. You had both dynamics there. And again, I think what I'm trying to emphasize in everything I say is that there are so many gray areas. Life is not either or, villain or heroine, good or bad. And so there were so many beautiful aspects to it. Life was simpler, no competition, but also no identity and community for me, no friends. And I was very, very lonely. And I thought about how I became religious in high school. I was also alone. I was in a non-Jewish school of 5,000 kids. In my year alone, there were 1,000. And so I was the only religious Jewish person. I didn't go to parties and I didn't go after school. I didn't go, like, the most I did was go to the debate team events. But, I became religious in high school and I was very alone.
Yeah.
And so then to go from there into 10 years of being alone again was very hard. And loneliness is real. And you can be alone with a lot of people in a big community, and you can be alone by being alone, right?
Yep.
And so I think part of what helps there, and again, back to your question about like what are the cornerstones of leadership, is resilience. That's my second answer after empathy, is definitely resilience. It's kind of like I have to stop depending on the world to give me the things that I need and start to work on myself and what creates that feeling of like resilience. Was I unhappy there? No. Was I lonely? Yes, absolutely. And that was very pervasive. And I felt like I don't think I could have continued without friends and a community. That was everything to me.
Was it very hard to change? Like that must have been a pretty big deal. You're kind of taking off a yoke in a way, because there's great responsibility that comes with that.
Yeah, I think, for the community, it's, how people say, you got to know when to move on,
Yeah.
And you have to actually know 5 minutes before.
Yeah, it's true.
You shouldn't move on when it's already aware. You should aware. It's like, you kind of see that point. You're like, leave while it's good.
Yeah.
And so I think, we definitely did. Community felt it was right. We felt it was right. It was right for our family. And I think there are people in my family who would not agree.
Yeah.
But, we needed to kind of move to the big city in a way to be part of the community. And by the way, that is not an antidote. That was not a panacea. It's just exchanging it for a whole new set of problems.
Yep.
Kids are now in school, and the dynamics and the relationship they have with other people and us, and a very hectic lifestyle. It was breathless.
Yeah.
And put a tremendous amount of pressure on our family as well. And I think, if I had to go back and do it again, I definitely wouldn't have done that. Like my youngest always says to me, "Do you have regrets? Do you have regrets?"
Yeah.
And I'm always thinking, what is she actually asking about? So I tend to say, no, not really.
Yeah.
But, do I have, I don't want to say regrets, but would I have made different choices? Yes.
Yeah.
I would have made, but that's not a regret.
I was going to say that's not regret.
It's not regret. That's just, I think I would have done it differently.
Right. Knowing what I know about myself now.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a massive change.
Yeah.
And it was very frantic and very hard to integrate on all levels. There was nothing easy about coming to a Jewish community and embedding yourself and then hoping that people would accept you and whatever. We landed on a few communities, which were very welcoming and very accepting, but not the ones that you think. So it was,
Interesting.
yeah. And then you have to create your own community as well.
Yeah. Wow. What's the thing that happened that made you want to continue pursuing further education, even as you were successful in your career, busy in your life? Why take on something new?
Well, if my father were alive to hear this, I'm
He's
sure
a
he'd
why
have
not?
something to say about it. But no, I think he'd have something to say about it. But when I was in high school, I was, thank God, a really good student and got a scholarship to go to an Ivy League school. That was his dream, that his children should do that. But wasn't necessarily my dream. I don't know.
Right.
It's like it was hard to tell then because I just kind of swept up in his identity and that kind of thing. And so, and I'm going to say this, and I know this is these things are going to last forever, but, I've thought about it so many times. And really, my becoming religious was like a little bit of a rebellion.
Interesting.
It's like actually the opposite of what he wanted. He wanted me to be that corporate, successful person, Ivy League student. And so, by being religious, that was literally going in the other direction.
This is an absolute twist on my usual
Yeah.
conversation.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm sure. And so, becoming religious and forsaking that golden education and golden opportunity that was going to change my life and open all these doors was I think at the time I wasn't, you don't really absorb the decisions you make. And again, that's going back to like, what choices would I make? Would I have made them differently? You know, if I was mature then, would I have known? And like, how do you become mature at 18? You just, you know, how?
Yeah.
How do you see? I think your son is very smart, but like, how do you see into the future like that? You can't.
Well,
you just
I
really
didn't.
see one step ahead of you. And how am I going to survive? And, you know, how am I going to change this discomfort I'm feeling? How does it get better quickly? Right. And so that decision of becoming religious was moving in the opposite direction of this higher education. And so I think the thing about higher education and just education in general is the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And, you know, I didn't make that up. So, you know, and so the more you learn, and I'm addicted to learning, and I will learn from everybody and everything and but the idea of being in a classroom, whether it's online or in person, and in person I prefer, it's that spark, it's that excitement of like, something is happening here, you know? And in Oxford, it's just like there's 52 global leaders in one room. And going back to that film I showed you, everybody's got a story. There's captions to everybody, and you don't see them. And so there's something magical that happens in a classroom from the professor's perspective, from your perspective, and sharing your knowledge and experience. And it's just like, it's magical. And to me, that's just like the elixir to kind of developing and living and continuing to develop, because we're not. And if you stay still, you will stay still.
Well, I heard the saying once, and I've actually said it a million times, but because of the Earth's rotation, quite literally, if you're staying still, you're moving backward.
Right.
So it's
like
right? Like staying still is literally going backwards.
Yeah,
so
I
you're
love that.
constantly in this pursuit of more.
Yes, but not in an insatiable way, which is just like, when will it ever be enough?
Right.
I find each revolution of education, as soon as I finish one, I'm like, I do ask myself, like, what's next? But not in a way like that wasn't enough.
Right.
Like, that was great. You know, I just finished my final paper now, so that was great. But as soon as it was submitted, I'm like, what am I going to do now? Right. So like, I get excited about the thing. And now, again, going back to what I was talking about, being lonely.
Yeah.
I'm never lonely in a classroom. I'm never lonely with feeling that there's this huge network that I can talk to them. I can understand. And like, I feel like sometimes I spend so much time by myself, whether it's traveling or at home, and I'm not out there enough. And I think like I could learn so much more. I could work and develop myself and develop the world and people so much more. And that for me is the magic of education. I really think I should sponsor something now.
We talked a little bit about like this concept of having it all. And people listening to you right now might think, oh my God, I mean, she was a shlicha and she has 7 children and she's got a master's in law and a master's in this and, you know, a global fixer. You know, she must have it all.
So before I answer that, I do want to explain the whole fixer thing, because, you know, we laugh about that, but like, what does it mean?
Yeah. What does it mean?
Yeah. What does it mean? And I think we didn't answer that part. So I just don't want to miss that. You know, the whole Olivia Pope thing, when you first said it, I laughed out loud because I also love that show.
Well, Olivia Pope, for anyone who's listening doesn't know, is like she's a fictional character. It's a TV character. Kerry Washington plays, and she's a Washington
Love it.
bigwig, and
me too.
She gets she gets somehow involved in all sorts of top secret, high level situations where she's required to do very outside the box thinking, creative problem solving. It usually involves a connection that she's made in all of her lifetimes. And she somehow always gets it done and looks very stylish doing it.
Right. So like, you literally have described my life. And like, you know, I'd like to think the stylish too, but that's, and the way you've described it right now is so resonant with me, because it's literally looking at the world like a chessboard, like I said earlier, and it's looking at like a game board. When you were a kid, I don't know, we played Stratego.
Yep.
You know, you move all those little pieces here and all those little armies there, and you know, and it's really like about looking and zooming out and going, well, like, what is the context here? There's like the pestle analysis we do about political and, everything social and that kind of stuff. But there's also the context of like, who do I know? How can this work? What's the resolution? What's the fix?
Yeah.
And when I say fix, I don't mean that something is broken,
Right.
but like, how can we resolve this so it might move faster or work better? How can I put you in touch with somebody else?
Yeah.
And then you've got a connection. And so this leads on to like that one thing you wanted to mention, but like this idea of like, there might be a problem that's so big in the world. You're like, well, what can I do? But that's absolutely not true.
Right.
Everybody has connections. Everybody can zoom out and go like, wait a minute, this is a huge problem. I'm not going to fix everything, but if I can put this one in touch with that one, if I can raise some money here, if I can contact them, if I can write a letter, if I can, be in touch with people, and if I can do all that and then address one area or unlock a problem that might help to address a bigger issue.
Yeah.
And that's to me what a fixer is.
Yeah.
Because like you described, it might be somebody 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's creative thinking. I'm definitely out of the box as a person and a thinker.
Yeah.
And that definitely is something that's a highlight of my consultancy and career is like, I just don't think in a linear way. I just don't. I look at something and the way you look at it, you'd be like, oh, it's black and white. I'd be like, no.
Right. So interesting. You've somehow found yourself being involved in this recent Middle East conflict in the war in a capacity that I think some of us were not privy to. You don't have to go into details, but you had a front row seat to this war, maybe a little more front than a lot of us. Anything change for you from day one to day 108, 109? Anything change for you? Do you know anything now that you didn't know before? Or just because this war is evolving in an interesting way for me. It actually really ties back to what you just said. I think there were a lot of people who looked at this conflict and threw their hands up and blowing tissues and blowing their nose and crying and doing a lot of squawking. You were somebody that took action. How can I help? How can I facilitate? How can I get equipment or needs from point A to point B through different jurisdictions and a lot of red tape? And am I allowed to mention that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Somehow.
I know you want to.
Oh, I really want to because I feel very cool. But you ended up somehow being involved in arms dealing, which I think if anyone's watching the visual of this podcast, might be very surprised to learn that this little pint-sized Jewish lady from Northwest London has arms dealers as some of her contacts. So I want to know if there's just anything that you feel differently about now, panning out, that felt different than the beginning.
So that's a multi-pronged question.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of answers to that. I don't think there's one answer. The answer is yes, I feel differently.
Okay.
The arms dealing thing is, this is the most cohesive talk I've ever given, really, because everything I'm saying ties into everything I'm saying.
Yeah.
So you can kind of hear about my experience and how we're addressing something that's so current. I'm going to answer it in two ways.
Sure.
One is the practical side and one's the emotional side. Like you said, it's kind of like the empathy and then the doing.
Okay.
Because you can't really have doing unless you have thought and emotion. And having just the thought and emotion is not enough. Like, where does it go? What are you doing with it? And I think everybody has a role to play for sure. But I want to take a step back and zoom out a bit and say that the way I feel and see what's happening now is an evolution of our people. And we've been here before.
Yeah.
And the problem for us is that we don't know what we did then that made us so triumphant and so resilient. And so this, aside, and again, I don't want to talk about like the actual war and the conflict, but just talking about the dynamic of how we relate to a world crisis like this, which affects us, our identity. It's an existential threat. And so what do you do when you're threatened like that? And it's very difficult. And I think a lot of what I do in philanthropy is the storytelling. And if I think about all the stories I've told about different charities, I learned two really important aspects to storytelling, and I'll make a full circle and come back to your question. Yeah. The two aspects for me which are most important about storytelling, and again, it's about leadership as well, is to understand that there is a universal theme. That's one, which is like there's something in every story which people can go, that's me. Yeah. So if you've ever been to like a really great movie or read a great book, and you're like, that's me, it like reminds me of a great story. Can I just tell it quickly?
Sure.
Yeah.
This is your time, Yael.
Yeah. So I love this story so much. I know a film producer very well, and he's made some really great films. And one of them was My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Yeah.
And I said to him, Alan, I love it. This is my father. And he goes, no, Yael, it's everybody's father. I was like, no, it's my father because that's the way my father was. And like, he explained to me why they chose Greek, and like, Italians were overdone and the Jews would have been something else. And like, so like Greek was really a good identity, So I'm like, okay. And I'm like, but no, my father said those things. He's like, no, that's the point. Yeah. Is that everybody looks at it and goes, that's me. So that's one aspect, is universal theme. So every story we tell about charities or about our history, there's some aspect of it which will touch you. And so like if I think about the stories that I've told about charities, one is about, like I said, it was an orphanage in the Ukraine. And so the story wasn't, we need to find these kids because they need to be Jewish and that stuff. That wasn't the story.
Right.
The story was based, in my view, and the way I told it, was based on a radio advert that I heard in 1993 in England. And there was a classroom, and the teacher, there's only audio, right? She said, Anthony Blair, and the little boy said, here, ma'am. And she said, Margaret Thatcher, and a little girl said, here, ma'am. And so the point of the advert was teach because you don't know who these children will become.
Ain't that the truth?
And so we think about like the really great personalities in our Jewish identity, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau. And, somebody found him in a transit camp in a depot camp, after the war. And so that's the story, and that's like the universal theme. And the other part of great storytelling, I think, is asking a question which keeps you awake at night. And I remember Jonathan Sacks, Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, of blessed memory. He had a great campaign, will your grandchildren be Jewish? And if that doesn't bother you and keep you awake at night, that and Succession, if that doesn't bother you. And so kind of circling back to the episode that we're in now, there's so much that we can tell ourselves, so much to learn from our history. There is resilience that's embedded. There is action, talking about that. How did I end up with like Jordan the arms dealer calling me, Like I always thought that way, like I have like a whole list of arms dealers, but it was a matter, and I have to thank actually one of my kids for this, because when the war broke out, it was a festival. And I remember running home from the synagogue saying to my daughter, I was like, there's a war, And she's like, yeah, and there's nothing we can do about it right now. Right. So let's just have the festival.
Right.
And as soon as it was over, she was like, Mom, get your contacts out, get your phone out. 25 years of networking and fundraising and everything this is the moment that you need it. And I think about the story of Purim when, Esther's uncle, Mordecai, said to her, maybe you were created just for this moment.
Yes.
And if you don't do it, somebody else will. So there's a calling. And I feel that this time right now for all of us, it is a calling. Yeah. And again, I'm not getting involved with it. There's a lot of people doing really great stuff.
Yeah. No, but I had a similar thought that what if everything I did on my Instagram led up to the moment where I could help my brother's unit
and
get what they needed.
And look what you did.
And they did. The people rallied. And that exact thought, what if everything led up to this moment? So it's interesting. It is, you're so right. I mean, this war is different than other wars in that it is asking us very hard questions about who we are and what this means to us as a people.
Exactly.
In a way that I never have been asked before in my entire life. So it's profound. It's a different war for all of us, And
it touches us, and it does make us cry, and it should.
Yeah.
It should, because if you are crying, it's touching something deep inside of you.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a problem with crying.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying.
I have a problem with crying and nothing else.
Yes. I also have a problem with that. We've discussed this,
But I'm a little tougher than you. You're a little more diplomatic than me about it.
Yeah. I do feel there's a lot of emotion that's struck here. But when I see people online crying, and they don't necessarily have somebody in the war, they don't necessarily, but like, you think like, why are they crying?
Yeah.
And so like, I might be a little bit put off by the visuals.
Yeah.
But I actually think there's something really beautiful there.
Yeah.
You're crying for your people, your identity. You're crying for what we've lost and what could be. And to me, that's a beautiful thing. There's tremendous potential there for leadership. There's tremendous potential for people to feel something and to be passionate about it. Can you imagine if we were all like, well, all right, I'll just write my check. Right?
True. Very good reframe. I like that perspective a lot. I stand corrected.
Okay.
I like that reframe. That's good, because I just get irritated.
Yeah.
But that's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, if they didn't care, they wouldn't say anything.
I have a couple last questions, a couple final questions. Of all the things you've done, all the accomplishments, and you could say children, but please don't. Of all the things you've done so much, is there something a particular accomplishment that stands out to you that just vibrated in your soul in a different way, that lit you up, and that just something that stands out to you that you've done or accomplished?
Yeah, there is. And I'm quite clear about it, actually, because I remember the day and I remember the feeling. And it was when I graduated from the University of Liverpool with the Master's in Law.
Wow.
And I stood on that stage.
Are you a lawyer?
No, I have a master's.
Okay.
To become a lawyer, I've got to go backwards and do the bachelor's and then qualify,
Okay.
which I intend to do. But now that I've said it, I am going to have to do
Oh,
it. Okay,
God.
Okay, but again, it's not because I think I keep adding stuff. It's because I genuinely love the law and I want to pursue the justice in the world, spoken like a Libra. But I remember standing on that stage and like thinking back to both, like it was like a conclusion and a full circle of like, disappointing my father, and what did that mean, and was this about him or was it about me, and kind of just, it was like I was a new person, like this was mine. I did this, I achieved this, I actually like vanquished my imposter syndrome by knowing, like being verified, like you are smart, you can do this. That film,
They
The
saw
Help.
you.
Yeah, they saw me, but the film, The Help,
Yeah.
you are smart, you are beautiful,
You are
worthy,
kind.
you are kind.
Yeah.
And it's like nobody had to tell me, walking across that stage when they called my name,
Yeah.
calling your name, saying it out loud, you did this. It was transformative for me.
That's huge. What a beautiful memory.
Thank you.
What an incredible thing. By the way, I said don't say your children like tongue in cheek. It's because when you're a mom, it's like, we know that a great accomplishment. I just want to make this clear, because I don't want to offend anybody who's like, wait, but
You're always going to offend somebody.
That is my greatest accomplishment. It's because I know I'm a mother too, so I know that we know that our greatest accomplishment are these humans that we've created. But I'm talking about, and this comes back to like having this identity also outside of only being a mother, which is very important.
Yep.
And what keeps you up at night?
Succession. No, not the film, not the movie. No, not the movie.
I was like, same
No,
girl.
I do love it. It was my ringtone for a while. I do love it, but I think like we're all a bit addicted some ways to like car crash life and drama, and we see that on the internet as well.
Yeah.
It's like, again, like back to the crying, why are we watching these people crying?
Yeah, it's true.
But
like what comes
it's kind of like what comes next.
Yeah.
And so I think about that a lot, because I do think in the context of my children, it's like whatever mistakes I've made and whatever I was and am now and whatever I will be, there is an evolution of identity. And like I said, this kind of thing of like, well, why am I here? Again, back to that. When you go to sleep at night, you wake up in the morning, you're like, was it worth it?
Yeah.
And so that question, was it worth it, in my opinion, is answered by the next generation.
Yeah.
And that goes back to mentoring, and it goes back to this give and take, and it goes back to philanthropy. And it's like the thing that I've learned, certainly in the last few years, but more acutely in the last 6 months, is just that it's all connected.
I have never realized how much it was connected until just now in this conversation, because you found a way to literally link them through every theme. I never even processed how much they were connected. And the philanthropy thing, I'm gonna think about that for days. That is really a revolutionary concept for me.
It's actually old school, though.
I know.
It's very old school.
Philanthropy is so old school.
Yeah.
In an ever-changing, very scary, terrifying world, what are some things that you do to ground yourself, to feel safe, to feel calm, to get yourself to a place where you feel like it might be okay?
Well, I know it's going to be okay.
Okay.
So that's part of it.
What does that come down to? Faith?
So I think part of it is faith.
Okay.
But not faith in a technical way, faith in a very much like there is a creator and this is a bigger picture
Okay.
and I have a part to play and I need to go and do it. But I have to trust that there is a plan. I can't see the whole plan. I don't know the whole plan, but I really do believe that there is a pathway toward this. And I have to I do keep going. But my North Star is definitely, and this is going to sound odd, but like really looking after myself. And so checking in regularly, much more like I want to live a thoughtful life. I want to live a meaningful life. I'm always working toward a meaningful life. I don't want to waste a minute. You reach a certain age and you're just like, who knows how many days and years I've got left on the clock. And I just don't want to waste a second.
Yeah. I love that. Yael, thank you so much for doing this today. Thank you for I enjoyed every second of that. I feel really grateful that you were able to do this and come here and share some of your wisdom. I really wanted my community to get to know you. And I think that this was a really, really great way.
Thank you so much. Loved being here.